I never thought it would end this way. Not with Mark, not with the sound of packing tape ripping through the silence. It was so ordinary, so painfully mundane. I stood frozen in the doorway of our bedroom, my eyes locked on him as he sealed another cardboard box, the marker squeaking as he carefully labeled it. I couldn't move. Not because I wanted to stop him, though part of me did, but because I needed to understand what was happening. The same attention to detail, the same precision that once made me fall in love with him was now directed at packing up his life, a life we'd built together. I cleared my throat, and the sound made him jump, his hand jerking as the marker slipped from his fingers and rolled under the bed. He hadn't noticed me standing there, but I wasn't sure if I should even be surprised. Mark was always more comfortable around his mother than around me these days. "You're home early," he muttered, his voice distant, like he was trying to pretend nothing was wrong. "Clearly, not early enough," I replied. Stepping into the room, my heels clicked loudly against the hardwood, each step slow and deliberate, but each one felt heavier than the last. It was like I was walking through molasses. "Mark," I said, my voice steady despite everything. "How long have you been planning this?" He didn't answer right away. His hands ran through his hair, a nervous tick I used to find endearing. He looked at me like I was some kind of stranger. "Clara," he started, his tone too calm. "We both know this isn't working." "Do we?" I asked, the anger bubbling inside me, a feeling I hadn't let myself acknowledge until now. I picked up one of his neatly labeled boxes. "Winter clothes," it said in his perfect architect's handwriting. "When exactly did we decide this?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from creeping into my voice. "Vivian thinks," he began, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Of course she does." I laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "Vivian knows best. Tell me, Mark, do you even breathe without checking with her first?" His face hardened. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I set the box down with enough force to make him flinch. "Fair would be having a real conversation about our marriage before you started packing it away in neat little boxes. Fair would be acknowledging that I'm your wife, not just some temporary inconvenience standing between you and your mother's approval." "You're being dramatic," he said, his eyes avoiding mine as he continued with his packing, dismissing me completely. But the dismissive gesture only ignited something fierce inside me. It was like he wasn't even here, just a shadow of the man I used to know. "My little projects are unreliable, you said," I shot back, trying to remain calm. "My little projects paid for half this house, Mark. They would be doing even better if your mother hadn't scared away 3 of my biggest clients last month." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you didn't know?" I grabbed another box, this one labeled, "Important Documents." I opened it and started flipping through papers, bank statements, insurance papers, and at the bottom, a folder I didn't recognize. A wave of unease hit me. Inside were detailed reports on my business dealings, copies of emails between my clients, and photos of me meeting with competitors. I couldn't breathe. "She's been having me followed," I whispered. Mark reached for the folder, but I stepped back, clutching it to my chest. "This isn't what you think," he said quickly, his voice rising with nervousness. "Oh, I know exactly what I think," I replied, my voice like ice now. "How long have you known about this?" He didn't answer. His silence was enough. I didn't need him to tell me. It was clear. My chest tightened, but I stood my ground. "Get out," I said quietly, my anger crystallizing into something colder and more unforgiving. "Take your boxes and get out." Mark's face twisted with frustration. "Clara, please," he started, but I was done listening. "No, these stay with me." I waved the folder in front of him, making sure he saw the damning evidence. "Get out." I threw an empty box at him, its contents scattered across the floor, his shirt spilling out like they didn't matter anymore. He flinched, though, as if I'd struck him. "Go run to Mommy. Tell her she won." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "But make sure you tell her one more thing. She just made the biggest mistake of her life." Mark stared at me for a long moment. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he silently gathered his things and walked past me, pausing by the door. "I'm sorry it ended this way," he muttered, but I saw it for what it was. Guilt over the wrong thing. Not over the marriage, but over being caught. "You're not sorry it ended this way," I said, my words sharp. "You're just sorry I found out this way." The door closed behind him with a quiet click, but in my mind it echoed like a gunshot. I collapsed onto our bed, the bed I'd picked out, the one that still smelled like him, and still clutched the folder in my hands. The tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I opened my phone and dialed Sophie. "I need your help," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's time to make Vivian regret ever hearing my name." Sophie didn't waste any time. She was at my door less than an hour later, 2 bottles of wine in hand and an expression that said she'd been mentally preparing for what came next. I could tell by the way she looked at me that she wasn't sure if she was about to help me pull off the craziest thing I'd ever done, or if she was about to watch me go completely off the rails. Either way, I didn't care. I opened the door, let her in, and wordlessly handed her a glass. It was time to get down to business. I spread the surveillance photos across my dining table like some twisted puzzle, the pieces all clicking into place as I poured us both generous glasses of red wine. Sophie picked up one of the photos, me sitting at lunch with the Hendersons last month. The timestamp was clear. "Who does this?" she asked, flipping through another photo, this one of me with clients from Brighton Corpy. I barely glanced at it. The dates, the locations, they were all there. All the places I had been, the meetings I'd attended, the conversations I'd had, all watched, all documented. "Someone who's been planning to destroy me for years," I muttered, my voice flat but tinged with a deep simmering fury. Sophie studied the pictures, her face hardening. "Vivian," she said slowly, the weight of the name hanging in the air. "She's not just trying to control Mark. She's been trying to control everything. Your career, your life, your reputation." I nodded, feeling the sting of every realization that had come crashing down in the last hour. How had I not seen it before? How had I not understood what she was doing? This wasn't just about me and Mark anymore. This was about something bigger. Vivian had been systematically tearing apart everything I had worked for, and now it was time for payback. I leaned forward, meeting Sophie's eyes. It's time to show her exactly how good I am at playing the game. Sophie's eyes softened, a little concerned, but I could see that she was starting to understand. "Are you sure about this, Clara? This isn't just a petty revenge plot. You're risking everything, your business, your reputation. You could go down with her." "I don't care," I said flatly, reaching for the laptop. "I've lost everything already. And you know what? If she wants to fight dirty, then I'll fight her in ways she'll never expect." I typed a quick email to Thomas Chen, the tech millionaire I'd worked with last year. He'd been the one that Vivian had tried to poach from me for her own development projects, the same one who'd pulled out of the deal after a meeting with her. It wasn't hard to get his attention again. He'd been looking to invest in more properties, and I knew exactly how to get him on my side. The email was short and to the point. "You might want to know how Vivian Harrison has been manipulating the development deals we've worked on. I have proof that she's been sabotaging your investments." The email was sent. No turning back now. Sophie stayed quiet, watching me, and I could tell she was both impressed and worried. "Clara, this could get ugly," she said softly. "Vivian's not going to let this go without a fight." "I don't care about her fight," I said, the anger in my chest simmering again. "This is bigger than me. This is about showing her that I'm not the weak, helpless woman she thought I was. She doesn't get to control me anymore." Sophie nodded slowly, sipping her wine. "All right, I'm with you. Let's make her regret ever underestimating you." The next few days felt like a blur. Emails, meetings, a flurry of texts back and forth between me and Thomas, who was quickly becoming a vital ally. Each piece of evidence I gathered, each connection I made, felt like I was building something strong, something that would finally bring Vivian's carefully constructed empire crumbling down. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my stomach. Maybe it was the knowledge that my life was about to change irrevocably. Maybe it was because I knew that once I started this war, there would be no going back. But there was one thing I was certain of. Vivian had started this, and I was going to finish it. And then the phone call came. Mark. It had been 4 days since I'd seen him, since he'd walked out of our home. leaving me with the pieces of my shattered marriage, my crumbling reputation. I didn't want to answer it, but something inside me told me I needed to. I had to know if this was his attempt to fix things or just another one of his mother's manipulative little games. I let the phone ring once, twice, then picked up. "Clara?" His voice was soft, almost like he was trying to tiptoe around something. "Mother's called. She knows about the email to Thomas. She's furious." "Good," I said, my voice cold. "Let her be furious. Tell her I'm coming for her." Mark didn't respond right away, and I could almost hear him trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. "Clara, this isn't just about you and her. It's about everything. My family, my future. Do you really think you're going to win this? Do you think you can tear down everything she's built?" I stood up, walking toward the window, looking out at the city below. The lights were blinding, but they didn't bring me any comfort. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. "I'm not trying to tear everything down. I'm trying to rebuild what she took from me," I said, my voice steady. I didn't wait for his response before hanging up. There was no more talking, no more pleading. Mark had made his choice when he chose his mother over me. I had no reason to explain myself anymore. The next step was to make sure Vivian understood what was coming for her. The gala invitation arrived a few days later, an official, invitation-only affair, where she expected to see all her friends and business partners. I could practically hear her planning her little performance in my head. It wasn't going to be just another gala for her. I was going to make sure it would be the night she would never forget. The gala night arrived too quickly, like the calm before a storm. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, the air was thick with anticipation, yet all I felt was a strange sense of detachment. It looked like any other high-profile event, crystal chandeliers sparkling above, the soft hum of polite conversation filling the air, and the clinking of champagne glasses. But for me, it was the battleground where I would settle the score. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I didn't have to. The whispers were already swirling as I made my way through the crowd. People stared, but no one dared approach. Everyone knew who I was, Clara Harrison, the woman whose marriage had fallen apart. They all wondered how I was going to handle it, how I was going to play my part in Vivian's show. I spotted her almost immediately, standing near the center of the room like a queen ruling over her court. Vivian was composed as always, her presence commanding, but something in her eyes had changed. There was a flicker of uncertainty behind that well-maintained facade. She hadn't expected me to show up. She had thought she had the upper hand, and in her mind, maybe she still did. Mark was nearby, caught in a conversation with a group of investors. His eyes met mine for a split second, and I saw him flinch, but he quickly turned away, his back straight and his posture rigid. He was trying to pretend he wasn't watching me. He wanted to believe he had moved on, that he could turn his back on everything we'd built together without consequence. But deep down, I knew he was still tethered to me. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of reconciliation. It was a smile that said, "You haven't won yet, Vivian. You're just about to realize how badly you've underestimated me." Thomas Chen appeared at my side a moment later, his presence a reassuring anchor in the chaos. His eyes flicked over to where Vivian stood, and I could tell he understood the weight of the moment. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. "Let's make sure Vivian regrets everything she's done." Before we could take another step, a voice cut through the air, sharp and unmistakable. "Clara." I turned, and there she was, her smile razor sharp, a perfect blend of sweetness and venom. Vivian. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, a slight twitch of recognition passing through her, like she knew exactly what I was about to do. She hadn't thought I'd have the guts to show up. She probably thought I'd run, hide, and let her win. But there I was, standing tall and unbroken. "I'm so glad you could make it," Vivian said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. She knew I wasn't there to play nice. "Of course," she said, her voice tightening. "Your presence is noted." The tension between us was palpable, and the guests around us had begun to notice. Whispers spread like wildfire, people turning their heads to listen in, eager for the drama they knew was about to unfold. "Vivian," I started, stepping closer so I could lower my voice just enough for only her to hear. I know what you did. I know about the emails, the surveillance, the threats to my clients. I know how far you're willing to go to ruin me. She stiffened, but quickly recovered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? I raised an eyebrow. You want me to believe that you didn't have me, didn't manipulate my business deals, sabotage my reputation. Her face didn't betray her, but I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had done everything in her power to control the narrative, to make herself look like the perfect matriarch. But I had all the cards now. I'm not going to let you destroy me, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. And I'm certainly not going to let you use my husband as a pawn in your games anymore. Vivian's smile faltered for just a second, and I saw it, a crack in her perfect mask. Mark, who had been watching from a distance, started to move toward us, but I held up a hand. Not now, I said, not taking my eyes off Vivian. You've already said enough. You can go now, Mark. He stopped in his tracks, looking between us like he didn't know which side to choose. But I wasn't giving him a choice anymore. He had picked his side long ago. Vivian, I continued, stepping closer, my voice low and cutting. You've been playing this game for years, but you forgot one thing. I'm just as good at it as you are. Her composure returned, but I could tell she was rattled. She wasn't used to being challenged like this. You think you can outsmart me? She sneered, her tone venomous. You're nothing more than a... I'm not done yet, I interrupted, cutting her off. You want to talk about loyalty? You want to pretend like you've been looking out for Mark? All you've done is destroy him piece by piece. You pushed him into this, Vivian. And now you're going to watch him choose. Because you can't control everything anymore. Vivian's eyes widened, and for the first time, she didn't have the words to respond. She was speechless, standing there like a deer caught in headlights. She had underestimated me, and now she had nowhere to hide. Clara, please, Mark said, stepping forward, his voice breaking through the tension. We can fix this. We can talk. I shook my head, my voice cold. No, Mark, you can't fix it. Not anymore, and neither can she. I turned my back on both of them and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, relief, anger, a mixture of both. But what I knew for certain was that I wasn't backing down. I didn't sleep that night. The gala had been a turning point, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Vivian still had a few cards left up her sleeve. The way she looked at me, like she was sizing me up, trying to figure out my next move, was unnerving. But I wasn't going to let her win again. Not after everything she'd done. The next day, I found myself pacing in my office, staring at the email chain from Thomas Chen. The messages had been exchanged in the days following the gala, and each one revealed something new. Something damning. Thomas had followed up with the investors, and sure enough, some had started distancing themselves from Vivian. They were starting to see her for what she really was, manipulative, dishonest, and dangerous. I knew it wasn't enough, though. Not yet. Vivian had too much power, too many connections, and I had no intention of letting her control my future any longer. I needed something bigger, something that would make her understand that she had no hold over me. I didn't care about the money anymore. I didn't care about the business. All I cared about was making sure she couldn't hurt me or anyone else, ever again. I was still thinking about this when my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I didn't want to pick up. I didn't want to hear his voice. But I knew I had to. If I was going to fix this, I needed to confront him. I took a deep breath and answered. What now, Mark? Clara, listen. He started, but I cut him off. No, I said, cutting him off before he could say anything else. I'm done listening to you. This isn't about you anymore. It's about me and Vivian and everything she's done. You let her control you. You let her ruin our lives, Mark. I'm not going to let you drag me down with you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought he'd hung up, but then he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I know what she did. I didn't realize it at first, but I see it now. She's been manipulating both of us. Both of us? I asked, incredulous. It's been just me. You've been too busy following her every word to see what she's been doing to me, to us. This isn't just about manipulation, Mark. It's about control. She's been playing you for years. You were her pawn, and I was just collateral damage. His voice wavered, and I could hear the guilt in his words. Clara, I never meant to hurt you. I never saw it like that. I was just trying to keep the peace. Peace? I scoffed. She's been poisoning everything. Our marriage, my business, my sanity, and you let her. You let her use me as a stepping stone for her own plans. Clara, I'm sorry, Mark said, his words breaking through the distance between us. I didn't see it. I didn't realize how far she'd gone. I didn't realize that I was part of it too. I don't care about your apology, Mark, I replied, my voice hardening. You can't take back what you've done. You can't fix this. But Vivian? She's going to pay for everything. I'm not going to let her walk away from this. Mark didn't say anything. Instead, there was a quiet click as he hung up. I threw my phone down on the desk, my hands shaking. For a brief moment, I wondered if I was going too far. But then I remembered everything Vivian had done, everything she'd taken from me, and the doubt melted away. This wasn't about getting even. This was about taking back control, about reclaiming what was mine. A few hours later, Sophie called, her voice urgent. Clara, you need to see this. Vivian's making a move. I felt a chill run down my spine. What's she doing? She's covering her tracks, Sophie said. I just got my hands on some of her financial records. She's trying to spin everything. She's already making moves to protect herself. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What do you mean, protect herself? She's trying to shift the blame onto you, Clara. She's even been telling people you've been sabotaging your own business. She's claiming you've been reckless with your finances, that you're unstable. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. The audacity. The lies. I couldn't believe it. She's trying to ruin me again. We need to act fast, Sophie said. I've got a contact in the legal world. They can help us expose her. But we need everything. Proof, connections, documents. I've got everything I need, I said, the determination in my voice stronger than ever. I'm not letting her destroy me. Not this time. I spent the next few days compiling everything I had. The surveillance photos, the emails, the financial records, everything that proved Vivian had been orchestrating her little empire of lies. I had all the ammunition I needed. Now it was time to go public. The moment I hit send on the email to my lawyer, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it. Vivian would have nowhere to hide. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of notifications on my phone. The story had gone public. Vivian Harrison, the real estate mogul with the pristine reputation, was being investigated for financial misconduct and manipulation. My heart raced as I read through the articles, the headlines screaming about her attempts to sabotage my business. She was being exposed for what she really was, a manipulative, ruthless woman who would stop at nothing to maintain control. But there was more. I'd made sure that the media had access to the truth about her lies, about her schemes, about the way she used Mark to keep her grip on everything. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about making sure Vivian faced the consequences for everything she'd done. I didn't expect a victory. Not really. The days after the story broke were a blur, a mess of legal calls, emails, and press conferences. The media had a field day with Vivian's scandal, but I could tell that something had shifted. She wasn't reacting the way I'd anticipated. Instead of crumbling, she was fighting back, and harder than I thought she would. It was in her blood, after all. Vivian Harrison never lost without a fight. She had people calling me, lawyers sending letters, and public statements defending her reputation. But they all felt like smoke and mirrors. I didn't need her empty words anymore. I had the truth on my side. The one thing I hadn't expected was Mark's reaction. He had been quiet since the phone call a few days earlier, but then he showed up at my apartment. No knock, no warning. He just stood there, looking lost as ever, eyes swollen, hair disheveled. Clara, he started, his voice shaky. I didn't want this. I never meant for you to get hurt. I folded my arms, standing at the doorway, and let out a breath. You didn't mean for me to get hurt. Mark, you didn't even see what was happening until it was too late. You let your mother control everything. Our marriage, my business, and now you want to apologize? My voice was colder than I expected, but there was no room left for soft words. "I didn't see it," he said quietly. "I didn't realize what I was doing, what she was doing." I shook my head, feeling the anger bubble up again. "No, you didn't. And you didn't fight for me either. You chose her, Mark, every time. And now you think you can just waltz back into my life and fix things? It doesn't work like that." "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said, his voice breaking, "but I'm asking you to understand. I've been so wrapped up in her world, I never saw how much she was tearing everything apart. I don't know what to do anymore. She's all I've ever known." I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all the pain, he still couldn't see the depth of the damage Vivian had caused. She had made him blind to everything that mattered. She had stripped him of his own identity, and now she was trying to strip me of mine. But it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him too. "Mark, she's going to do this to you too. She already has. You're just too scared to see it." His eyes shifted, his gaze distant. I don't know what to believe anymore. I sighed, stepping aside to let him in. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe I wanted him to see the mess he had helped create. Or maybe I just needed to say the things I'd been holding inside. But it was clear that he wasn't the man I once knew. "I'll say this once, Mark," I said, standing in front of him. "If you're serious about leaving her, about finally making a choice for yourself, you need to stand up. And you need to do it now. Because if you don't, I'll make sure Vivian has to answer for everything. I'm not stopping now. You can stay on the sidelines if you want, but I'm not your backup plan anymore." His face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting him like a brick. He opened his mouth to respond, but couldn't find the words. Instead, he looked at me, a defeated expression in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Clara," he whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He already knew." I watched him walk out of the apartment, leaving me standing there, numb but resolute. He was going to have to figure this out on his own. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. The next day, I received a call from Sophie. She sounded urgent, her voice more frantic than usual. "Clara, I need to warn you. Vivian, she's pulling out all the stops. She's going after the Davidson deal. I don't know how, but she's trying to shift everything to her favor again. She's starting to play the long game again." I felt my heart drop. "What are you talking about? She can't win this, Sophie, not now." "I don't know," Sophie said, frustration thick in her voice. "She's got her claws deeper than we thought. She's pulling some strings, and I've just gotten word that she's trying to frame you for the leak of the environmental report. She's blaming you, Clara. She's trying to shift the blame to you, make it look like you sabotaged the project." I froze. A wave of cold fear washed over me, but I knew I couldn't let it show. She's going to lie her way out of this, isn't she? Sophie's silence told me everything I needed to know. Vivian was capable of anything. I took a deep breath. I won't let her. She can't win, not like this, not after everything she's done. I spent the next few hours preparing, putting everything in place for what was about to come. I couldn't stop Vivian, but I could make sure she paid the price for trying to destroy everything I had worked for. The plan was simple. Expose her, once and for all. I called my lawyer and set up a meeting. I needed to make sure the press had everything they needed. They had to know the truth, about Vivian's manipulation, about how she'd been behind the leaks, the sabotage, and everything she'd done to destroy me. By the time the day was over, I had gathered enough evidence to blow her whole operation wide open. It felt like a victory, but it wasn't. Not yet. Vivian was still out there, plotting, scheming, but I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not after everything I'd been through. I was stronger now. I just had to wait for the right moment. And when it came, I was going to make sure that Vivian Harrison would never have the chance to hurt anyone again. The days leading up to the final showdown with Vivian felt like a whirlwind. Each call, each meeting, each email was another step closer to the truth being exposed. The media had picked up the story in full force. Headlines screamed about Vivian Harrison's empire crumbling, her manipulation of clients, her sabotage of my business, the environmental scandal. Her carefully constructed world was falling apart piece by piece, and I had a front row seat to watch it all unravel. It wasn't the victory I thought I'd feel, It wasn't sweet. It wasn't even satisfying. Not the way I expected it to be. Instead, I felt a sense of emptiness, like the years of fighting, of battling her, and everything she represented, had taken something from me. There was no joy in watching her fall. There was only the cold, harsh reality of what it had cost me to get here. I stood in front of my office window one morning, watching the world below, but feeling nothing. The silence in my apartment was deafening. The story had broken wide open, Vivian's guilt clear for everyone to see. She had no choice but to step down from her company, her reputation in tatters, her name no longer associated with the success she'd built on lies. But I didn't feel victorious. Not entirely. I wasn't like her. I didn't want to destroy her the way she had tried to destroy me. I had my own life now, my own identity, and I was done playing games. I didn't need to tear anyone else down to prove I was strong enough to stand on my own. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I recognized the number immediately. It was from Thomas Chen. "Clara," he said, his voice calm, but I could hear the excitement in his tone. "The investors have pulled back the retraction of their statement. The deal is back on, and we're in." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "What do you mean, the deal was off for good?" "They've reviewed everything, Clara. All the evidence you sent, the financial records, the documents. They're ready to work with you. They're backing you, not Vivian. This is your moment." A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt surreal. I had fought so hard for this. After everything Vivian had tried to do to destroy me, to ruin my business, to tear me apart, it was finally happening. The world was changing. I was changing. "Clara?" Thomas's voice snapped me back to the present. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," I said softly. I wasn't expecting this." "You've earned it," he said. "You've done the hard work. Now it's time to build your future. The world is yours, Clara." I leaned back in my chair, a wave of relief washing over me. It was over. Vivian had lost, and I had won. On my terms. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about taking back what was mine and moving forward. The following weeks flew by in a blur of meetings and new opportunities. The deal with the investors was just the beginning. More clients came in, more projects to manage, and each one was a step towards solidifying my place in the industry. I was no longer the woman trying to survive in the shadow of Vivian Harrison's manipulations. I was Clara Harrison, the woman who had built her own empire, and this time, it was based on trust, integrity, and my own hard work. Mark tried to reach out a few times, but I never answered his calls. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. I wasn't the woman who would sit around and wait for him to fix things anymore. I was the woman who had taken control of her own life, who had reclaimed her power, and that was worth more than anything he could have ever given me. One evening, as I sat in my office, reviewing a new design proposal for an upcoming project, Sophie called me. Her voice was light, teasing. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I just saw a headline. You know that deal with Thomas. It's going to change the whole industry. You're going to be the face of it." I laughed, a real laugh this time. The kind I hadn't allowed myself in years. "I can't believe it. After everything, I thought I'd never get here." "You did. You did it, Clara. And you're just getting started." She was right. I had started over. I had built something real. Something that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. I had taken all the pain, all the lies, all the manipulation, and turned it into fuel for my own success. And I wasn't stopping now. The door to my office opened, and I turned to find my assistant standing there with a stack of contracts. "These are ready for your review," she said with a smile. I stood up, taking the contracts from her hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't rushing to fix things, to clean up someone else's mess. I wasn't waiting for someone to give me permission to succeed. I was doing this for me. "Thanks," I said, smiling at her. "Let's get to work." As I sat down at my desk, I glanced at the framed photo of me and Sophie on the shelf. It was from the night we celebrated landing our first big client together. I had a moment of clarity then, a moment where I realized that I didn't need to let anyone define me. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Vivian had thought I was weak. She thought I was too fragile, too dependent. She thought she could break me. But what she didn't realize was that I had already rebuilt myself, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The world outside my office window was still spinning, but this time, I wasn't just watching it from the sidelines. I was in control. I was the one steering my life, my future, and for the first time in years, I was thriving. Story 2. My life took a crucial shift first April morning as the petals of flowers fluttered in the air. Jane Hansen is my name. I was celebrating my 20th birthday on that specific day. There ought to have been a lot of vibrant events. However, my daughter Emma Sobs started my morning on the bed near me. Emma, who was barely a year old, had woken up with a milk craving. I rushed to my feet and scooped her up. I always had the desire to live because of the warmth flowing from her petite physique. It was the sense of her silky skin, the beautiful fragrance of newborns. It was the reason I was here. I whispered quietly, "Good morning, Emma," and gave her a nice head kiss. She had the same silky black hair as mine, but there's little mistake that her father gave her those lovely brown eyes. I occasionally felt hurt by those eyes, but Emma's innocent grin made even that anguish feel precious. I've made an attempt to keep Emma's father out of my thoughts every time I think about him. I feel like my chest is tight. When he learned I was expecting, he disappeared. He changed his contact information and deleted his social media accounts. He seems to desire the erasure of his entire existence. I recall the day I last saw him. I can still picture his face while we were sitting across from one another in a cafe. His face lost its color when I informed him I was expecting, and then there was a seemingly never-ending pause when he stated he needed some time and walked away. I was 18 at the time, a high school senior on the verge of starting college. I had a lot of expectations and plans for the future. The world appeared to be full with opportunities. I wanted to be a writer and was planning to study literature. I would spend my weekdays reading at the library and my weekends going to the movies with pals. I was simply a typical girl in high school. That all changed when I found out I was pregnant. My parents' response was exactly what I had anticipated, if not more so. Disgraceful. The reputation of our family has been damaged by you. I still hear what my mother said. That day, around nightfall, I recall the gloomy mood in the living room. The hush was broken by my mother's quivering voice and my father's heavy sighs. As if attempting to persuade herself, my mother sobbed and again said the same things. How did this occur? She spoke in a voice as icy as the wind of an October night. However, my sister Elisa was not like that. At 16, she was intelligent and vivacious. She was a stellar student and my parents' favorite cheerleading squad leader. Her parents had always desired a daughter. In regards to my pregnancy, she spoke very little. Periodically, she would stare at me with empathetic eyes. A mixture of relief and sympathy prevailed, as if to convey that I am unique. I had been desperate in the 2 years since Emma was born. At night, I worked at a shop, and during the day, I went to community college. In order to study, I reduced my sleep, and somehow, I was able to earn a childcare certificate. Emma was largely looked for by my mother at this period. My mother would be holding Emma when I got home from my night work, looking worn out. I occasionally caught her softly singing lullabies. I could sense her affection at such times, but there were always a few thorns in my mother's sweetness. She was very critical of Emma when she was taking care of her. "You were careless," she would remark, "and that's why this occurred." Emma's diaper was being changed. Her words were piercingly harsh, yet her touch were soft. "Are you aware that you're causing us problems?" She would reheat the milk and sigh. My heart was heavy with that sigh. "Would that you were more like Alyssa?" My mother would often murmur such things after putting Emma to bed. Like a plague, they crept into my heart. I heard such words nearly every day. I would frequently cry in my room as I held Emma and listened to her gentle breathing. My goal was to give her a better environment, but the walls of reality always smashed that dream against. The idea of economic independence remained a pipe dream. I heard my mother's voice coming from downstairs one morning after I had finished giving Emma her milk. "It's breakfast time, Jane." Her voice had a weird tone, a mixture of worry and expectation, and an uncomfortable tension. I took Emma into the living room downstairs. My folks were waiting for me, looking serious. The table was devoid of breakfast. Rather, some papers were spread out. "Take a seat." The resonance of my father's voice was unusually low. Following instructions, I sat on the couch with Emma in my lap. She was quieter than usual, perhaps sensing the tense atmosphere. "Jane, we must speak," my mom started, her hands shaking a little. "It has to do with Alyssa." My heart jumped at that very moment. Last night, I heard my parents' excited voices and the sobbing coming from Alice's room. I assumed something important had happened based on the sounds of footsteps moving back and forth in the hallway. As I waited for my mother to say something else, time seemed to slow down. "Alyssa is expecting a child." I choked. I became pregnant at the same age as my sister, who was only 18. The coincidence appeared to be an unfortunate turn of events. "Who is the father?" I nearly whispered out my question. The room's already dense air seemed to get even heavier. "It's Chris, the son of the president of the real estate firm." With a note of pride in her voice, my mother answered. My heart ached at the sudden shift in her tone. The sole child of a prominent and affluent family in the area, Chris Baker's father ran one of the most prosperous real estate companies in the area. In high school, Alyssa reportedly began dating him, according to what I had heard. At the school's cultural festival, I had met him. He was a young man of height and intelligence, the way he gazed at Alyssa with pride while holding her by the waist. At the time, they did make a picture-perfect couple. Although I was truly delighted for my sister's happiness, that memory now evoked nuanced feelings. My dad cleared his throat. "We've decided on something. I didn't realize at the time that this choice would alter Emma's and my destiny. This is where Alyssa and the baby will reside. Chris will accompany them." This was a strange comment. This property did have 4 rooms, but they were all in use at the moment. My parents' bedroom, Alyssa's room, the room for Emma and myself, and a former guest room used as storage. "And so, Jane," my father's voice was thick, "I'm sorry, but I need you and Emma to go." A huge bang seemed to ring overhead, and for a while, everything became white. A buzzing in my ears and the room's atmosphere seemed as if it had frozen. "What?" My voice shook faintly. Emma glanced up at me anxiously, her little fingers holding my sweatshirt hard. "She is delivering a son, our grandson." With excitement, my mother said. Her voice sounded hotter than I had ever heard it. "He will carry on the family tradition. He needs to grow up in the right setting." The light in my mother's eyes was abnormally intense. I could really see my parents' astonishment when they found out Alice had a boy. "However, Emma is as well. Emma is a female," my mom said icily. Her speech was devoid of any hint of sympathy. "In addition, you are a mother who is not married. Our reputation is impacted." My parents realized everything at that precise instant. I had always been a disgrace, as had Emma. Alice's pregnancy, on the other hand, was fortunate since the father was from a wealthy family, and the unborn kid was a boy. Emma gave a little cough. I was brought back to reality by that sound. I have to keep this kid safe. I needed to protect her future. What time must we depart? I sounded really composed today, my dad replied. Tomorrow, Chris will move in. It had the feel of a bad dream, but that was the truth. All right. I got up and gave Emma a hug. She grinned naively, oblivious to the circumstances. I couldn't cry in front of her, but that smile almost broke my heart. I crammed the necessities into cardboard boxes and hurriedly packed our items that morning. My cheeks started to well up with tears. But they were more than just sorrowful tears. They were filled with disappointment, rage, and somehow a feeling of freedom. Living here, I'm always aware of other people's gaze. Those times were coming to an end. The reality was terrifying, but it was also a fresh start. Alyssa stayed in her room, closed. Through the door, I could occasionally hear her sobbing. Crying sounded like a sophisticated emotional expression. Was it remorse, guilt, or simply pregnancy-related hormonal changes? My sister's heart was beyond my comprehension. Was she under stress from the pregnancy inside of me, or was she suffering from this circumstance? Feelings of betrayal battled violently with sisterly affection. I gave my Aunt Susan, my father's sister, a call in the afternoon. The phone rung, and my heart raced. I had always had her on my side. She never failed to write me a handwritten note on my birthday and crocheted me sweaters every Christmas. She is a genuinely kind individual. What? Over the phone, my aunt became irate and raised her voice. It was filled with astonishment, rage, and profound grief. "Are the two aunts sane?" I stumbled. She answered without hesitation and in a hurry, "Come on over to my place now. You and Emma can always find a room available." I cried again when she said that, but this time I was relieved. My cheeks began to well up with warm tears. On the other end of the phone, I experienced optimism for the first time. "I'm coming to get you right now with my car," my aunt went on. "In half an hour, I'll be there. Just bring what you'll need." A determined firmness replaced the normal gentleness in her voice. "However, the baggage. Do not be concerned. Later, we may return for it. You're in at the moment. Emma's security comes first." I hung up and drew in my breath. I had packed the last of our things into the car by the evening. My parents looked at us as if we were strangers when they said goodbye. They appeared to have vacant eyes as they stood at the doorway. Despite opening her mouth many times, my mother eventually remained silent. There appeared to be a hint of sorrow on her face. It may have been my imagination, though. With the expression of someone bidding farewell to a contractor, my father folded his arms and watched us go, avoiding making eye contact. "Farewell." At my remarks, I said. They simply gave a mute nod. Holding a new stuffed animal she had purchased along the trip, Emma sat in the rear seat of my aunt's vehicle. "For a fresh start, you need new friends." "Kindly," my aunt remarked. On the drive to my aunt's house, I almost started crying at that compassion. With trepidation, I took out my smartphone and launched the social networking app. Like a dam bursting, years' worth of suppressed ideas and feelings poured forth in a torrent of words. I got kicked out of my childhood house today. My parents required a place for their grandchild because of this. My daughter is 1 year old. I was always ashamed to my family since I was an unmarried mother. I had to face this truth every day and apologize as though my entire being had been a mistake. But all changed when my sister became pregnant with the son of an affluent family. With only a day's notice, we were forced out to make room for the successor to carry on the family tradition. They expelled their own daughter and grandchildren without hesitation. Readers of this piece should be aware that prejudice of this kind still occurs in the 21st century. There are still parents who would expel their own daughter and grandchild just because the mother is single and the daughter is a female. However, it's not over yet. It is a fresh start. Now Emma and I are a real family. Love is not usually symbolized by blood. Additionally, I now understand what a true family is, and I experienced a deep feeling of relief as soon as I published the piece. I had let the world see all of the feelings I had long repressed. I had intense anxiousness at the same moment. There was no going back. "Right now, are you all right?" Gently, my aunt inquired. She spoke with a great deal of support and understanding. "Indeed." I gave a little nod. "I think I've finally been able to communicate how I really feel." I got strength from Emma's happy laughing coming from the back seat. It was becoming late when we got to my aunt's place. "It was wise of you to attend." With Emma and I cradled in her arms, my aunt said. The strain of the day began to gradually fade. There was the familiar smell of soap on her body, the scent of a secure environment. "This is now your new residence." There was a certain weight to those remarks. The interior of the house was really clean. In the corner of the living room, my aunt must have set up the space for us to arrive. Clean bedding had previously been laid out in a little baby cradle. A hot supper was placed on the table. The room was filled with its scent. After Emma went to sleep that evening, I spent a considerable amount of time talking with my aunt. We spoke about everything while seated at the kitchen table. Alice's pregnancy, my parents' behavior, and my current emotions. The fog inside my chest started to solidify as I spoke out loud. "Old customs have always bound your dad, but I never thought it would get this bad." In her speech, my aunt expressed her love for us, while also expressing displeasure in her brother, just because a son is on the way. To still have such opinions in these times, my aunt shook her head. Additionally, I had a surprising amount of response to my social media post the next morning. My smartphone's screen was inundated with notifications, thousands of shares, tens of thousands of encouraging remarks and kind remarks from complete strangers. Was what I did the correct thing? As I was making breakfast, I expressed my nervousness. "It has become so large." "You made the right decision," my aunt firmly stated. "Unless someone speaks up, nothing changes." My grandfather phoned Jane that afternoon. "Is it accurate?" His voice shook with rage. Intense passion had taken the place of the customary serenity. "Yes," I said softly. "It's all true. I understand." There was a long pause before my grandfather's husky voice began. "Your grandma and I will visit tomorrow. Let's hear it all." My grandparents came to my aunt's place the following day. My granddad went directly to Emma as soon as he walked in. At first, cautious, he gave her a kind grin, and she warmed up instantly. "That house has been maintained by our wealth," he murmured, cradling Emma in his lap. He spoke with a great sense of regret. Nevertheless, they expel their own granddaughter and daughter. My grandparents had a lot of money. I didn't realize until then that my grandpa had actually assisted in the acquisition of the home where my folks resided. My grandfather was responsible for the huge house and the well-kept garden. With tears in her eyes, my grandma said, "Perhaps our silence was the cause. They've been overindulged by us. If you are rejected by them," firmly, my granddad said. "Emma and her new stuffed animal are sleeping on his lap. You and Susan will receive the whole inheritance." The scenario was changed by their statements. There was a firm decision in his voice. This was an explicit declaration of purpose, rather than just a threat. My aunt started crying. "Dad, Susan, I'm sure you'll use it right," my grandfather said, "for Emma and Jane." My grandma gave a quiet nod. As he stroked Emma's hair, my grandpa remarked, "We find it hard to come to such a decision. However, difficult choices must occasionally be made." My parents called me non-stop after that night. I disregarded them at first. However, the frequency grew with time. "Let's chat, Jane." I had never heard a more distressed voice than my mother's. "There has been a miscommunication. After all, we are family." Her voice was obviously desperation. They must have understood how my grandfather's choice would affect their way of life. "Don't you simply want the inheritance?" I said. Over the other end of the phone, there was quiet. That quiet was proof that what I had spoken had struck its mark. Over the phone, I could hear my mother's breathing become labored. "Why would you say that?" Her voice faltered. "Because isn't it true?" I was surprised at how composed I sounded when you tossed Emma and me out. You appeared to have no reservations. Melissa sent me a mail as well. My sister's lengthy text message showed up on the screen. "Jane, I apologize. I had no knowledge. I heard from our parents that you wanted to go out on your own." The smartphone I was holding shook a little. Alice's statements could have been somewhat accurate. Perhaps our parents had not been honest with her, but that didn't justify her lack of interest. I inhaled deeply before typing my answer carefully. "Emma and I weren't at fault, but neither is your son, except you did nothing except watch." After that, Melissa didn't respond. Emma sprang onto my lap out of nowhere. My cheek was brushed by her little hand. I was pulled back to reality by her warmth. After a week, things took a surprising turn. Abruptly, Alyssa departed our parents' house. Early in the morning, my mother's neighborhood acquaintance delivered the news. Alice's things were piled into a big automobile that was parked in front of the home. Despite their best efforts, our parents were unable to stop her. His father, Chris, was there to help her. I've made the decision to move in with Chris. I got a call from Alyssa that afternoon. I hadn't heard her voice that clear in a long time. "Our parents are acting improperly. I'd rather not be involved." Her statements caused me to feel a range of complicated emotions. Her choice was admirable, definitely a brave thing to do. However, why hadn't she recognized it earlier? Why hadn't she raised her voice? When were Emma and I getting evicted? "Alyssa." A slight crack came to my voice. "Why now?" "Since that day, Jane, I've been thinking a lot. I've experienced restless nights." Alyssa broke down in tears on the phone. "Chris's folks have welcomed us. Whether it's a girl or a guy doesn't matter to them. It should be that way." As promised, my grandparents formally updated their will a month later. My parents' inheritance was taken away, and Aunt Susan and I were given the rights instead. My father called me in a rage to tell me this news. "Have you done anything?" He spoke sharply over the phone. "Do you intend to turn on your family? Betray the family?" I gave a forceful but quiet response. "That was the one that drove away?" Emma and I without hearing my whole answer. My father ended the call. I put a lot of effort into creating a new life in the months that followed. Emma began going to the daycare that my aunt ran, and I got a job teaching preschool. I had trouble juggling childcare and work, but I was no longer lonely. I had previously. My name is Hampson. Good morning? Every morning the kids welcomed me with happy voices. One of them was Emma. She had a hard time telling the difference between teacher and mom at first, but now she uses both phrases with a unique twist. My coworkers made me feel quite welcome, and I enjoyed my work. My social media post had a lot of views, yet no one had any unfavorable comments. Many others agreed with me, stating that speaking up was gutsy of you. Jane, I lack the bravery you possess. The facility's head said, a veteran child care worker. That bravery may one day help someone else. My social media post did in fact prompt a lot of replies from others in like circumstances. Young moms who had also been evicted from their houses were among them. I began talking to them, and sometimes they asked for guidance. Perhaps others can learn from my experience. Emma adjusted to her new surroundings with ease. She enjoys playing in the little garden at my aunt's house. My heart is whispered to by her innocent smile. My most treasured possession is your grin. Emma's second birthday is coming up. She is surrounded by affection as she grows up. At my aunt's house. My parents and I haven't communicated. Alyssa and I occasionally message each other. She is making a valiant effort to start over. I haven't forgiven her completely, though. She has expressed regret and admitted her errors. I want to share this tale with Emma when she's older and remind her that you are valuable no matter your gender. You cannot be replaced. We are currently on a different journey in life. At least we are genuinely surrounded by family, even though the path is not easy. Story 3. Hannah thought my home-based hobbies didn't warrant residing in the family home, so she recommended that I relocate into an affordable apartment. She told my in-laws that she was fresh from the city and wanted to replace me in the house. They never fully comprehended my lifestyle of working from home. Even my spouse William now appeared to be plotting against me due to Hannah's influence. The fact that they failed to acknowledge that I was the one paying the house's mortgage was discouraging. I was struck by the question, why should I stay with people who made me feel unwelcome? If they wanted me gone so badly, then I would do just that. I was fed by frustration and had reached my own limit. I made the decision to give them responsibility for the mortgage. Having made that decision, I divorced William and moved on, not realizing the difficulties they would soon encounter without me. Amy William is my name. I was 3 years younger than my spouse. Although we met at work, our relationship wasn't your typical office romance. William was employed by my office's janitorial service. When I lost both of my parents in a short period of time, life had struck me a severe blow. After becoming unwell, my father was given a 5-month survival estimate. My mother also passed away from her own health issues throughout his sickness. I had no parents or siblings to lean on after their death, so I had to face life on my own. I would frequently be overcome by the sadness. I cry when I see unexpected things, but, especially at work, I miss my sadness with smiles. I was attempting to conceal my suffering while I was absorbed in my thoughts beside a window on the day William and I first really clicked. We had previously exchanged nans, but we had never had a meaningful conversation. William came up to me that day to inquire about my melancholy state of mind. It was surprisingly simple to open up to him, maybe because he was a bit of a stranger. He was comforted by his empathy when he found out about my parents. He talked about how close he was to his own parents, which made me feel less isolated in my grief. Our chats and, eventually, our connection outside of work began at this point. William introduced me to his parents when we first started dating, and they were quite polite and accepting of my predicament. Our relationship with his family grew naturally, and we eventually got married without a conventional proposal. We started a new life together after being married, finding a comfortable apartment close to his parents. Imagining a day in the future when having children may be part of it. For greater freedom, I changed jobs to a remote position. I told William about this big development, but he didn't really understand what it meant. Although he was aware that I worked from home, he was unaware of the specifics of my profession. My income was steady despite the work shift, so I was still able to pay for our living expenditures. William made less money, so we decided he would put it aside. His contributions were little, partly because he had a low-key social life that mostly consisted of going out with friends and myself. It also worked out nicely for him since I was in charge of our money. Among the numerous advantages of working remotely was the opportunity to have leisurely dinners with William, something I was never able to do at my previous position. In the past, cooking had been a straightforward task, but it was eager to please him. Making more natural meals brought me joy, and our shared existence seemed peaceful and satisfying. But after a few years of marriage, an unforeseen issue arose. William's boyhood house was destroyed by a terrible fire, wiping out treasured memories and possessions. His parents were fortunately unharmed, but the loss was profound. They temporarily moved in with us, and I tried to help them, just as they had helped me at the loss of my own parents. In order to manage my work, I prepared comfort food and took on more housework. Even though we did our best to make them feel welcome, William's parents were quite conscious of their reliance on us and worried about staying too long. Their obvious desire for independence prompted William and I to make a big choice. We had never talked about it directly before, but we would construct a new house to house us all. In light of our situation, it felt appropriate. The time seemed ideal to utilize the money I had been accumulating carefully, apart from William's savings, to build a new house that would commemorate the past, while representing a new beginning for his parents. Although it had many memories, the old house, a lovely timber building constructed by my great-grandfather, was no longer useful. William's parents were thrilled and appreciative of our choice to construct a new home, which signaled the start of an exciting new chapter in our lives. Her family's perseverance in the face of hardship was demonstrated by this team effort. As William's parents' health issues worsened with age, they made several specific demands for the new home we were going to build. Eager to make sure they were comfortable, William suggested a number of extra additions, which naturally increased the cost, much above what we had originally budgeted. We were committed to making it work in spite of the growing costs. I accepted the improvements for our new house since I thought they would be beneficial in the long run. At this point, I start to observe a change in the relationship between William and his parents, Tyler and Samantha. He began claiming to be the driving force behind the building of the house, and they often thanked him without acknowledging my financial involvement at all. It appeared that William hadn't told them about the down payment coming from my money, even though the mortgage and ownership documentation were in my name. His parents put pressure on me to express thanks for anything I believed I had contributed to my efforts, based on his idea claims. Concerned about asking Tyler, Samantha, or William for recognition, I increased my financial contribution, not because I wanted to be thanked, but just because I could. But I was really irritated by William's comments about my alleged obligation to him and his inability to clear up his parents' misunderstandings. I thought he would at least cease downplaying my participation, but I didn't insist he reveal the entire scope of my efforts. Rather, the house construction project appeared to give him more confidence, and to my horror, I found out that he was spreading lies about his job, saying that he had a link to the famous firm I was affiliated with. He did engage with them on business, but the manner he reported it was deceptive. My faith in him was damaged by his habit of deceit and exaggerated self-importance, which also made it harder for me to engage with his parents because they seemed to support him without conditions. Moving into our new house was supposed to ease these tensions, but as we got situated, the underlying problems got worse. Despite my financial assistance and constant work responsibilities, William and his parents did not comprehend the legality of my remote work and mistook my home-based employment for leisure. As a result, they frequently complained about my alleged inactivity and implied that I should contribute more. Because of their rudeness, I decided to work from my cafe in order to get away from the incessant insults and find safety outside of our house. This shift at my workplace was a direct reaction to the increasing unease and miscommunication in my own household, underscoring the widening gap between us. I kept pushing William to clear up his parents' misunderstandings regarding my employment. Even so, he might not really understand the nature of my work. My money supported his parents and the rest of our family. All I needed was for him to tell them this basic fact. William, however, downplayed my worries and advised me to disregard their remarks. His parents started treating me like their personal assistant as a result of the idea that I wasn't working, which made me responsible for all home duties. When I reached my breaking point, I faced them, hoping that William would be there to console me. Rather, he chastised me for voicing my opinions, and startlingly showed me divorce documents as a warning to live up to their demands. I felt helpless in the face of his unheard-of rage and ultimatum, and I had to grudgingly comply with their requests. Both William and his parents showed a marked lack of interest in me after this episode, so my job was my sole source of solace and a way to avoid the unpleasant realities of my family life. William's sister Hannah opted to stay longer after visiting our new house at this turbulent time. William's parents started complaining to her about me almost immediately, accusing me of ignoring my duties and scolding me for spending too much time alone with my computer. They made fun of my commitment to my profession, questioned its legitimacy, and simply said that I must be a nerd for being so involved with technology, all the while implying that I accomplished nothing worthwhile. I felt as though I was living off their largesse without contributing. As they made assumptions about my previous position, they denigrated me by implying that I had worked as a cleaner for William's business. William's false statements regarding his job stoked this conjecture, resulting in an inverse storyline in which I was portrayed as a guy who was suddenly employed and he was positioned as a high-ranking employee. I became ostracized and ridiculed as a result of this fake world. My circumstances deteriorated when Hannah declared she was leaving her work in the clothing industry to move in permanently, citing a yearning for change and the opportunity to launch a company from our new, opulent house. William and his parents enthusiastically embraced her choice, which further alienated me in my own household. While balancing my professional obligations, I was forced to dine by myself and prepare meals for a family that no longer included me at their table. This arrangement continued until Hannah abruptly announced her wish to remain forever on the day of her departure. Her revelation was welcomed by William's parents and William himself, who took delight in the compliments for the house and confirmed my status as an outsider in my own home. She found the house pleasant and seized the chance to start again in her work. There wasn't a room set aside for Hannah, even though she recently decided to live with us permanently. She had been using the guest room before to her declaration, but her house needed more space, and her new permanent status necessitated a more permanent solution. Hannah bluntly declared that she expected me to leave after 2 weeks with us, saying, "I'll live here." She assertively said, "So you should leave," implying that my home-based lifestyle wasn't worthy of a spot in such a fancy house. She implied that I need to look for a less costly place to live somewhere else. Samantha, who supported Hannah, rejected my attempts to defend the quality of my work, leaving me helpless against their unjustified criticisms. The claim that I wasn't productive only because I worked from home was an unfair pressure technique. As William watched the drama play out without speaking up or clearing up the misunderstandings, my frustration grew. So far, I have kept quiet, considerate of William's sentiments. However, the circumstances forced me to publicly state the truth. Declaring that the house was registered in my name, I approached Samantha, Tyler, and Hannah. My money had provided the first down payment, and I was responsible for the mortgage payments. Without William's financial assistance, William's attempt to further denigrate me was a panic attack that swiftly escalated into defensive hostility. He had erected a facade and was desperately holding on to it. Hannah and his parents supported him, calling me the liar. Since they mistakenly think William could manage the household's finances, it became evident to me that leaving this poisonous atmosphere could be the only way to keep my sanity intact. I re-examined the divorce papers that William had previously threatened because I was determined to get out of this unworkable situation. At first, it seemed to please him that the house title would be transferred to him because he probably imagined obtaining complete ownership without understanding the responsibilities that came with it. But William's genuine dislike of the hassles of the procedure was shown when it came time to transfer the mortgage into his name. Unaware of the financial and legal ramifications, he never imagined it would be as easy as signing his name. I reluctantly took William, who was unaware of the situation, to the bank and a lawyer for the required consultations. William was preoccupied with his phone during the meeting and didn't pay much attention until it came time to sign the paperwork. He inquired eagerly as to whether this would formally put the house in his name. He enthusiastically signed once I confirmed it. Utterly unaware of the significance of his new responsibilities, he would in fact receive the property and its mortgage obligations when the legal proceedings were over. I had carefully laid out the facts several times, but I knew that only the full force of his new position as sole proprietor would expose the entire scope of his misunderstandings and the unanticipated financial commitments. William's response left me in a state of amazement. He joyfully informed Samantha, Hannah, and Tyler of the news, still feeling the radiance of his seeming accomplishment, even after the house and mortgage had been transferred into his name. I couldn't understand how they could still believe that William worked for a reputable firm while considering me unemployed. I felt both amazement and a feeling of freedom as I watched everything happen, since I knew exactly what I needed to do next. William arranged a trip to celebrate the divorce after the move, and I was told to leave the house while they were away. They went on an extravagant vacation overseas, expecting me to go without a trace, but I did something about it in those 12 days. As I completed the sale of an opulent condo on the top floor of a high-rise building, a location that seemed to have been waiting for me, I sold all the furniture and appliances I had brought into our shared house and packed my personal belongings, approximately $8 million in price. I took advantage of the chance to claim it as mine, as the timing seemed opportune. Although the 3 years of conflict with William's family had worn me down, I was excited about the possibility of beginning over in my condo. My parents left me a sizable fortune, which I prudently managed over the years to greatly increase my wealth without their knowing. In the past, I had hoped to share this windfall with William and retire early, but I chose to keep it a secret, which I now consider to have been a fortunate move. I had learned a hard lesson from the lack of financial caution, which strengthened my decision to conceal my riches. I was able to create a living area that really reflected my preferences after moving into the unit. Free from William and his family's influence and criticism, this new house turned into a haven where I could work quietly, surrounded by memories and treasured items, and without anybody interfering with my way of life. I was excited to embrace the peaceful life and try out new pastimes like taking a cooking lesson or going to a yoga studio. Then, surprisingly, William called me when he got back. When he realized that the appliances and furnishings were gone, his voice was full of surprise and outrage. He insisted that they go back, without realizing that my money had been used to buy each thing. I therefore had the freedom to sell or relocate them as I saw fit. They wanted to cut off all links to the household that had caused me so much pain, but I didn't feel obligated to leave behind any aspect of my existence. I felt genuinely free in my new condo, prepared to live a tranquil and contented life, far from the chaos of the past. William insisted that I buy the products again, after I told him they were already sold. I said that he should have no difficulty purchasing new ones because he works for a large firm. I hung up the phone after that, and didn't answer his calls again. I have completely embraced my new life 2 months after William and his family returned from their joyous trip overseas. I have made friends with my neighbors and taken part in a variety of activities, such cooking courses that a friend who lives directly below my apartment suggested. William called again one day when I was getting home from class, inquisitive yet wary. I replied, asking whether the paperwork was still having problems. His speech echoed the pandemonium of their homecoming, full of bewilderment and dread. The $6,100 monthly loan payback amount irritated him, and he wondered why the debt hadn't been paid off. Despite the bank's explanation, which he had obviously disregarded, he appeared to be totally ignorant of the financial obligations that now rested with him. He showed how little attention he had given during the transfer procedure by expressing shock that the mortgage wasn't paid off. I can still clearly remember sitting next to him, seeing his lack of interest, and now he was desperately trying to find a way out of his new responsibilities. However, it was too late. The mortgage had already been signed in his name. A pivotal moment occurred when William realized he was entirely liable for the loan repayments. It was completely unfounded of him to assume that I would be having difficulties following the divorce. Throughout our marriage, I had overseen our money, making sure we lived well together. As I thought back on the previous 5 months, I wondered about William and his family's lifestyle, probably living beyond their means under Hannah's influence until the mortgage's reality eventually set in. His situation seemed to me now as though it belonged to a complete stranger, and I became unconcerned about their financial difficulties. I took a moment to explain my current predicament to William. My profitable investments have allowed me to live comfortably in an opulent condo. His phone silence was revealing. His call stopped after that realization, which made me think he had managed to deal with his circumstances. William unexpectedly reached out once again, rekindling the bond I had assumed had been broken. Despite our past, I felt detached since our lives had changed so drastically since the divorce. Far from the complications of my former life with him and his family, I continued to concentrate on my newfound freedom and peace. I pondered what pressing issue had compelled William to call me this time. As it happened, there was a crisis. Meanwhile, in the background, their house was being confiscated. His family's worried, desperate voices could be heard in my ears. Samantha, Tyler's, and Hannah's. William begged for my assistance with a voice full of terror. At their door, an enforcement officer informed them that they were about to be evicted and that the house was going up for auction. When I asked if they had gotten any warning letters, I was honestly shocked to learn that they hadn't. When questioned further, he sheepishly acknowledged that it's possible that these letters were purposefully ignored and left open without any response. As the reality of their circumstances set in, with foreclosure imminent and the entire loan amount demanded immediately, each member of the family appeared to believe that someone else was handling the loan repayments. I couldn't help but be frustrated by William's seeming lack of optimism. I proposed combining their savings as a possible remedy, but was told the grim truth that this was not an option. While Hannah had quit her job voluntarily, Samantha and Tyler had spent all of their savings on extravagant vacations, relying on their son's feature support. Far from the prosperous city life she claimed to lead, she had been fired for embezzling money. Their financial facade broke down, exposing a serious condition. William had spent all of his money, living under the guise of a successful job while his family splurged, all under the mistaken impression that they were financially stable. Their home was eventually seized as a result of the accumulation of these bad choices. Amid all of this mayhem, as if our divorce hadn't broken our emotional and legal bonds, William made the desperate suggestion that we all move into my opulent condo. I responded with firmness and clarity. I decline. Our paths were no longer shared after our divorce, and my new life in the condo was a haven created for my success and independence, far from the chaos and dishonesty that had defined our marriage. My resolve grew stronger as the story progressed, particularly after overhearing my ex-in-laws, Samantha, Tyler, and Hannah, hurling insults at me over the phone. They labeled me a thief, a scammer, and heartless, which only strengthened my resolve to break off contact with them. The bitterness and blame were a direct consequence of their own choices, showing no signs of self-worth or remorse. Eventually, their argument spiraled inward, turning into a cacophony of blame among themselves. At that moment, I chose to sever all ties, quietly ending the call and ensuring no further contact by blocking William's number. A few days later, a newspaper headline caught my eye detailing a father-son altercation that escalated to police intervention, immediately raising suspicions about William and his family. Confirmation came through a mutual acquaintance revealing the dispute did indeed involve them and stemmed from tensions that boiled over after my last conversation with William. The altercation led to their arrests and minor injuries for all involved, along with a police warning. This incident not only bruised their physical well-being, but also tarnished William's professional reputation. As rumors of the fight spread through his workplace, leaving him in a precarious position following the fight, the house was sold and the family relocated to a dilapidated apartment. A stark contrast to their previous living conditions. Their new life was marred by infestations and neighborly complaints, marking a significant downgrade. Heinous history of embezzlement further complicated their attempts to stabilize, making it nearly impossible for her to secure employment. Thus, the family's financial burden fell solely on William, who, despite his efforts to locate me, found his inquiries fruitless. Thanks to the discretion of our mutual friends and the vigilance of my condo's concierge service. This chapter of my life, with turmoil and strife, felt conclusively close. As I embraced my new existence in the luxury condo, far removed from the chaos, my days were now filled with hobbies, work, and the peaceful solitude of single life. The decision to move forward unencumbered by the past or thoughts of marriage was not just a choice, but a declaration of my newfound independence and contentment.